up wanting that Duke offer. And, essentially Jeremy Roach commits to Duke, and he ends up being Coach K's chosen point guard of the future, and Caleb Love knew that and wanted to go and improve a point. And I think he made that very clear. The question to me is just, why hasn't he been able to replicate that level of aggressiveness in any of the games beforehand or since? So certainly it hasn't been the season I think that Caleb Love would have hoped for, the season UNC fans would have hoped he would have had. But no, I'd be interested to see if he has that same level of aggressiveness and prove-itness, if you will, in the second matchup.
To play off of that just a little bit, Brendan, we've seen how important the point guard matchup has been in the last 3 games of this rivalry. Do you think that coming into this game, Carolina holds the advantage going in the battle of the point guards?
It's tough to say, right? Because obviously Caleb Love played incredibly the last time these two teams met. And I think, again, I go back to, I think the personal nature of that really contributed. But in terms of different guys giving him different looks, I think that Duke has some interesting options that can make his life difficult. I think Jordan Goldwire at Duke, he's one of the best defenders in the ACC on ball. And he is someone who, if Caleb Love tries to, get crazy with the dribbles and not pass the ball and he gets sticky in the offense, Jordan Goldwire is going to take his lunch money and embarrass him. And he's capable of doing that. I don't think that Jeremy Roach or even DJ Stewart, so to speak, those other guys that Duke, I don't know that they necessarily are all that much better than Caleb. I think that all three, I would say, have had their ups and downs. But certainly, I think Caleb is capable of being the best point guard on the floor on Saturday. But he's also been capable of being that all season. It hasn't always come to fruition.
Usually the winner of this game is fighting for an ACC regular season title, a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, something a little more prestigious. Instead, both these teams are kind of fighting to try to get themselves into March Madness. How do you think, how much different will it be in the Smith Center intensity-wise in this game, if any? Or, do you think there could even be more intensity for this game?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a very intense game, and I think it's going to be a very intense atmosphere. I mean, just from having been in the Smith Center for the Florida State game, the first game that fans were allowed back in basically a year, that element of things really took the game to another notch. And, I think Roy Williams has said a number of times in his career, he said it again after that game, never lost the game because of a crowd, but I've certainly been pushed to a couple of wins because of one. And I think that that's going to contribute. I really do. And, Duke is desperate right now. Duke needs this win to have a chance of an at-large bid still. North Carolina, again, I think this is probably more of a must-win for Duke than it is for UNC. But, North Carolina can't go giving these games away. And if you are coming up on a losing skid to end the season, that's the opposite of the kind of momentum you want. So, no, I think the circumstances are obviously different, but I would expect no drop in intensity, and the fans are only going to create an even better atmosphere for that sort of game.
You mentioned this game means more on the table for Duke than it does for Carolina. Duke isn't the same team that this Tar Heels saw a few weeks ago, mainly with the departure of Jalen Johnson. What did you make of his decision to walk away from the team and prepare for the NBA?
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on that bone. There's been so much in the weeks since Jalen Johnson left Duke about, his quote-unquote camp, is he a quitter, all that sort of talk. And, I don't really want to get into all that because I don't know the kid. All I know is the facts of what I know. And that is that at some point back in December, in some way, shape, or form, Jalen Johnson injured his foot. What that injury was, we don't know. How severe it was, we don't know. But he did miss games and had a walking boot, and Duke ended up where they were able to win a couple of games without him. But still, this is a guy who we're talking about. He's a 5-star prospect, and you want to try and make that work as best you can. So for him to leave and say that he wants to rehab his foot and get healthy, how true is that? I don't know. Again, we still don't really have a lot of information about the foot. The thing that I can't blame the guy for is wanting to salvage as much of his NBA draft stock as possible. There are going to be teams that think he's a quitter. There are going to be teams who criticize his decision, and he is going to have to answer for it in NBA pre-draft talk. But at the same time, we're talking about generational wealth on the line. You know, we are talking millions and millions of dollars, enough to set up his family for long-term prosperity. I am never going to knock a guy for making that choice. I'm never going to knock a guy for looking out for himself and his family. So in that respect, I totally appreciate and can understand what Jalen did. And, you know, really beyond that, all the other stuff is just noise and it's ancillary discussion.
Duke isn't the only team that looks a little bit different. Carolina is definitely, different as well coming into this game than they were in the first one. And it's mainly the fact that Walker Kessler is now a part of this rotation again and has had some success. How do you think that Kessler has helped this team on both ends of the floor since sort of breaking out?
Yeah, it's been a huge help. I think that, you know, wherever UNC ends up going this season, if it's a deep run in the ACC or NCAA tournament or it's sort of straight out, one way or another, Walker Kessler is going to be a factor. I mean, if not for two separate COVID-19 quarantines that he had to undergo right before practices started in the fall. And this is a guy who he had to spend both of those quarantines in a hotel by himself, despite never testing positive. The team says, you know, hey, you had contact, so-and-so, enjoy your hotel. You can't leave for 2 weeks. I mean, that's tough. So he's had to work his way back from that. And that's the only reason we haven't seen him earlier, because in terms of skill, like actual skill offensively, post moves, some of the things that he can do just don't make sense to his size. Like, you know, if he's taking dudes off the dribble with his left hand and switching hands as he goes up to finish, there's only so many guys in the world that can do that. So I think offensively, he's probably UNC's most polished scorer already. I think his post moves and, you know, combination of baby hooks, counters, those sorts of things, I think they're as good as anyone on the roster. And defensively, he is probably the best rim protector UNC has. Him and Day'Ron Sharpe, I'd say, could probably fight over that. But, you know, he is a threat just in every single layup from other teams to block it, to get a hand on it, to disrupt it. And even if he's not, the threat of him looming changes the way that teams try and attack UNC defensively. So, Walker's emergence has been huge for the Tar Heels. It's going to continue to be regardless. And usually when he does well, the team does well. Don't think that's something Roy Williams hasn't noticed.
The first contest between these two Blue Bloods was a 91-87 shootout where both teams shot over 50% from the field, and Carolina put 6 players in double-figure scorings for the first time since 2018-2019. Can we expect the same type of game this time around?
I'd be surprised if we did. That was one of the better offensive outputs from either of these teams, and expecting either one of them to replicate that, I think, is probably a little unrealistic. I mean, it took Duke until overtime last night to not even get to 80 points. So I would be surprised if it was that high scoring. I think that just was, it's one of those games where guys are dialed in, guys are focused, guys are locked on. And, Caleb Love was a big part of the reason for that for UNC. You go back and look. I mean, the guy shot over 50% from the field, made 4 or 5 threes. Like, he hasn't done that in any other game all year. So, I'd be surprised if he was able to replicate that. I'd be surprised if either team was. But just because it's a little grittier, a little uglier, doesn't mean it's not still a good game.
Well, we talked about it a little bit earlier. You had mentioned it about the fans potentially playing a role in this game. They definitely played a role in that comeback against Florida State. How much of a role do you think that they will play in this season finale against Duke?
I think it's going to be huge. I really do. Especially considering that the majority of the people who will be allowed in the stadium are students, which 100% kudos to UNC for doing that. That's how it should be. Students, I feel so bad for college kids right now. Seniors last year, they lost their final semester, and juniors last year have basically lost a year and a half of their college experience. So for those guys to be in the Smith Center for one last Duke game, could potentially send Duke to the shadow realm, so to speak, cast them for all intents and purposes out of the NCAA tournament. That's something that these students are going to get up for, and they're going to be motivated. They're going to be loud, and I think that we saw it against Florida State. UNC doesn't come back in that game if it's not for the crowd. And I very much can see it having a massive impact in the Duke game. Who knows who is going to, come out and take that early lead and have a counter punch. But you can almost bet that there's going to be a run that UNC needs to make at some point in the game. And the students are going to push them on. I do think that's worth a couple of baskets.
All right, Brendan, I'll get you out on this. UNC sweeps Duke if they do what?
Turn the ball over less than they have any time in the last month. And really, it sounds so simple, but that is the formula for UNC. I mean, you don't have to shoot 45% from three. You definitely don't need to jack up 100 threes a game. You just need to not give the ball away. I mean, I think these young guards are still just struggling to understand the importance of possession. That's the most valuable thing you have. When you have the ball, it's yours. You get opportunities given to you. And when you turn the ball over, you're just relinquishing that. You're hurting your team. So, to me, this game is going to come down to turnovers. Duke is handsy. Duke likes to get turnovers. UNC likes to give it away. I think that could be a troubling recipe for UNC. But, again, if the Tar Heels are able to hang on to the ball, get shots up, let their bigs get second chance points, I think the UNC has a much better chance of actually sweeping Duke for the first time in years.
All right, Brendan, thank you for your time. Where can people find your work at real quick before we get you out of here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Twitter at Brendan R. Marks. I put all my stories out there and try and engage with people on social media. And then all my stories are up at theathletic.com. If you don't have a subscription, I'm biased, but I think we have the best sports writing in the world. Every sport you could want, also under the same umbrella. So, again, if you don't already, check us out. Try a free trial. We'd love to have everyone come and see what we got going on.
All right, Brendan, thank you for your time. We'll talk to you down the road, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right. Today I am joined by Isaac Schade from Sports Illustrated. Isaac, how's it going today, man?
Hey, Josh, I'm great. How are you?
I'm not too bad. It's March, so it's my favorite time of the year as a lover of college basketball as we're getting closer to conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament, which hopefully Carolina will find themselves playing in. And let's just dive right in and talk about this Tar Heel team, Isaac. A lot has happened since I last talked to you back, I believe, in January, early February. Can you help me make sense of their season so far?
No, I can't. No, yeah, I mean, goodness, it really is one of the craziest things in memory. They're just so up and down, and you can't predict what's going to happen from one game to the next, So I'll give it my best go of it. I honestly, I don't think it's actually all that complicated. I think what we're seeing is the result of two things. I would say COVID and youth. I think in any year, youth is difficult, but then around January, February, the proverbial thing that they start to become sophomores at that point. But just with the delay in preparation for the year, I think the youth has stayed young. And it's not just with the Tar Heels. We're seeing this trend, I would say, around the country that the best teams are veteran-laden teams who are returning a nucleus of guys who know how to play together.
Right.
But then teams relying on newcomers, whether it's, in Carolina's case, freshmen, or in some schools' case, transfers as well, they're not going to be as consistently successful. That's just the reality of this year. And so that leads to some games like Louisville or the second half against Florida State, where we see what the Tar Heels could be at their peak, but then you'll have games like Marquette or Syracuse that are just like, we are still a bunch of freshmen trying to figure this out.
Right. When we talked the first time, there was a lot of talk about Armando Bacot, who at the time was leading Carolina in scoring despite only getting 7 shots per game. He flashed forward to March. He's still Carolina's leading scorer, but he hasn't played at a consistent level. How much of the incident following the Duke win, where he got caught on camera partying without a mask on, that resulted in a game against Miami being canceled, how much of that incident affect his season moving forward, do you think?
Honestly, I think that has really probably had a bigger effect on his personal life than his play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, gosh, these guys have been under a microscope for so much of their lives. And incidents like that, I think, just remind him and the rest of the team, because as we found out later, it wasn't just he and Dayron, it was several of them.
Right.
That I think, if anything, it makes him insulate himself more, unfortunately, of like, oh man, I can't just trust people around me because of things like this that happen. And so I think, I hope not, but I fear that what it does is makes him more cynical about the world around him and, congregating with the general populace of the campus.
And that,
in terms of his play, I think it might have affected